12 Years a Slave. If I were to say one thing about director Steve McQueen, I would say that he pulls no punches. His first feature, Hunger, centers around the 1981 hunger strike of IRA prisoners in Northern Ireland, and it boldly depicts, with beautiful shots, brutal prison beatings, living conditions covered in filth, and the harrowing results of food deprivation. His next film, Shame, about an inconspicuous sex addict whose private life nearly destroys him, stares right in the face of a taboo addiction and its consequences. McQueen doesn't shy away from depicting images of immense pain and violence, physical, emotional, or psychological. For this reason, I think he may be a good candidate to tackle on the horrors of American slavery, despite not being an American. 12 Years a Slave is based on the real-life experience of Solomon Northup, adapted from his memoirs of the same name. Solomon, played by Chiwetel Ejiofor, is a free black man living in 1840s New York with his family, and he is an exceptional man. People around him probably view him as especially exceptional for a black man, but he is exceptional by any standards. He does marvelous work with his hands, both crafting beautiful violins and gracefully playing them. Handwork that is later contrasted by the hard labor of picking cotton and chucking corn. It is his exceptionalism as a performer that leads to his capture. Two men solicit him to perform for their circus in Washington, D.C. for 2 weeks, promising great pay. Instead, he finds himself drugged, shackled, and locked in a cellar. A menacing, ill-tempered white man tells Solomon that he is a runaway slave from Georgia.
You're no free man. You're nothing but a Georgia runaway.
And he mercilessly beats him when he protests. And it truly is a terrifying moment when Solomon realizes that without his papers, he may as well be a runaway slave from Georgia, because this white man's word carries much more weight than his in this part of the country. As you can imagine, from then on, Solomon encounters brutality wherever he turns. From a murderous ship captain who transports him along with a group of slaves, to a ruthless slave salesman, played by Paul Giamatti, who renames him Platt. Even when he is a compassionate and understanding slave owner, relatively speaking, in William Ford, played by Benedict Cumberbatch, it's ruined by Ford's racist and hot-headed carpenter, Tibbets, played by Paul Dano, who hates that Solomon is treated so well. Again, relatively speaking. It's with Tibbets that the conflict within Solomon arises. He can choose to live as the subservient Platt, who is respected by Mr. Ford as an exceedingly knowledgeable slave, but in doing so he must deny his true self and stand by as Tibbets abuses him and other slaves around him. An incident with Tibbets forces Ford to sell Solomon/Platt to the ruthless and dangerous slave owner Edwin Epps, played by Michael Fassbender. But this inner conflict continues. Epps has a complicated and horrifying relationship with his female slave Patsy, played by Lupita Nyong'o, and he envies the respect and admiration that Patsy has for Solomon. Solomon's desire to keep his head down in order to survive violently collides with his obligation to stand up to the injustice done to him and his fellow slaves. Sometimes it's subtle, sometimes it's not, but you can definitely see moments where Solomon is silently going through this identity crisis. And I think this subtlety is one of the stronger parts of the movie. And while brutal and horrifying, it made me cringe, it is beautifully shot. These once vibrant colors are now lifeless. The bright colors and lighting of Solomon's home state of New York is contrasted by the austere and somber cellar and plantation. In his first film, Hunger, McQueen used impressive long takes to show the most viciously violent scenes. And he does so in this film as well. But again, it's the human aspect that's the strength of the film. It's almost as if, as a free man, Solomon secretly feels better than the slaves around him, and that he doesn't belong there with them. He's rightfully a free man, therefore his captivity is unjust. But through his experience, he realizes that none of them belong there, and all of their captivity is unjust. Slavery is not just a vague period of time in our country. It happened to real people. With the unique perspective of someone who is free for his entire life and then enslaved, I feel like we get an even deeper appreciation of how unjust and evil it was.